Hello, Northern Lights Publishing welcomes you to RoundTable 360 with your host and moderator, Joseph Carrabas. RoundTable 360 brings together people in the creative fields, dancers, thespians, poets, actors, musicians, authors, and others from across the globe in conversation about things that are relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. Today's session is series or singular. Some creatives repeat what works. The author who creates a series, the actor who plays the same character in different productions, the artist who paints only wildlife, landscapes, portraits, the musician who can't escape the 1-4-5 3/4 time structure. Rather than exploring, expanding into something new, other creatives can't repeat their characters regardless of their efforts. Today's guests include sci-fi mystery author and forensics expert Greg Hickey, artist and art fitter Ann O'Brien, and a host of others. Stay with us and enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the July edition of RoundTable 360. Today, I'm going to read it so everyone knows I'm paying attention. Today's episode is series or singular. Some creatives repeat what works. The author who creates a series, the actor who plays the same character in different productions, the artist who paints only wildlife, landscapes, or portraits. Recently, I came upon someone who actually did one of 500 of the same thing and signed them, was doing well selling them. The musician, the musician who can't escape the 1-4-5 3/4 structure. What makes the decision between exploring and expanding into something new versus this is good, I'm good at it, let's continue? Does it go back and forth? What happens? I'm going to, I'm going to lead today's conversation with Sarah Bowden. Sarah is a gifted artist, visual artist, and I know she has created a multitude of series. I will call them series because I'm ignorant and she'll correct me. Please, Sarah, tell us, what made you decide to go from the singular things you were doing to the series work?
I'm trying to think back because the collection you're talking about was back in 2022, so 3 years ago. I had been an artist for a couple of years, but I was literally in that experimentation stage of doing all sorts of different types of art and sort of kind of sharing it with people and seeing what people liked about my style and so on. And I was also developing my own expressive voice because I haven't been an artist all my life. I was a teacher for 18 years and I wasn't an art teacher. I was a primary school teacher. And yeah, so I literally was doing absolutely everything, and it was really to do with just being creative. I wasn't really thinking about marketing my work or selling my work, although it was selling. And about 2022, I started to think that it would be really interesting to take a specific series or a collection, or an idea and explore it. And it sort of reminded me a little bit of when I was doing art back at school, because, for my A level, um, we created sort of work around a theme. And I thought that would be really cool. Find, different ways to, in this case, it was some sort of like owls. It was just how many different ways can I create it? How many different colors can I choose? How can I explore it with different textures? That kind of thing. Yeah.
So in your case, it was more an exploration of your abilities. You were expanding your abilities rather
Hmm.
than I'm going to create this series and see if it sells. You were already selling.
Well, yeah, there was an element of marketing involved as well,
Yeah.
because although a lot of artists sort of go niche, I don't want to niche down, I want to do absolutely everything. But if you're trying to please everybody, you're going to not please anybody, really. Or,
Yeah.
so I wanted to tap into the spiritual wisdom behind owls, or all animals really, but I started with owls. I wanted to attract a certain kind of woman who was interested in the animal wisdom to empower and inspire and motivate them. And I thought the owl was a great way to start, because even if you're not really interested in that, You know, owls are really appealing and a lot of people connect with them. Plus, my mum collected them, and the whole point of me becoming an artist was after she died, I sort of, just had a kind of, you know, massive breakdown, and everything changed and everything shifted for me, you know. So it was a lovely way to connect with my mum as well. So every
Yeah.
time I painted an owl, it was like, my mum's spirit was there. So it felt
So
good. Yeah.
excellent. So in your case, there was also the element of spiritual healing, for lack of a
Yeah.
better term.
Yeah.
Excellent, fascinating. Uh, let me call on Donna next. Donna, for those of you who are new to this roundtable, new to our roundtables, Donna is a gifted author who has created two separate series. Is that correct, Donna?
Right. Hmm.
One, and please feel free to correct me, Donna. One are cozies, and the other one are thrillers.
Right.
And you had quite the publication history going. You were with a major publisher and decided to break out on your own.
Yes, I did.
And wonderfully, your audience has followed you. Congratulations.
Mhm. Thank you.
Did you start, I'm going to write a series, or did you create a book? Did you write a novel and say to yourself in the writing of it, this character's got legs. Why don't we anthropomorphize it and go from there?
Okay. Back when I was not published yet, I was getting lovely rejections, which told me I was close. And many of the interested people were saying, is this going to be a series? So in the mystery field, uh, that's what builds a readership, and that's what they wanted. So I'm thinking, okay, I'll give them what they wanted. Also, the main character, just for lots of reasons, was pretty much me. I had a headmaster's wife getting involved solving mysteries, and uh, so I had the character in place very easily to keep doing. There are lots of reasons that I can explain how I felt that I was being very calculating when I started. Uh, I wanted my character to have range. I wanted her to have resources. I wanted her to be the logical person to solve each mystery. And uh, the thing with amateur sleuths, which Ginger was, you have to make it put your character in a position to be able to get more information than the police. So that's the trick with that. If you were doing a series for a working professional, a policeman, a private eye, etc., the opposite is what you have to do. You have to make it personal to them. Otherwise, they're just getting a paycheck, and who cares? You know, they're just doing it because it's their job. So in my second series, which I can tell you more about later, it's a little bit of both. She's an ex-cop who goes around and solves whatever she runs into. So more from other people, and come back when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Anne, you are an artist, and you are the creator, I believe, and owner of Art Fitters. Is that correct phrasing?
Yes, yes,
So you create environments for people, living environments for people.
that is correct. Plus I paint both.
In both your painting life and in your art fitter life, do you go through themes? Do you explore themes where you're repeating? I don't want to say repeating. You're creating similar works on a theme. I would imagine if you're art fitting a 10-room house, it's not much different than the next 10-room house, except the energy of the people is different. I don't know. I'm asking.
Yes, well, to answer your question, uh, the 10-room house, so we'll start with there, and then I want to get into the art portion as well. But, I get the energy from the people and the energy from the house. So, and there's got to be, as you put it, a theme or a relationship. Once you find that people feel comfortable. Why I say a series, or say it's a series, is there's got to be some sort of, in my profession, relationship from one to another. And just like, Donna's characters developing and, people wanting more of that, you can apply that logic to a room or to a building where, somebody feels good and they want more. They might want it slightly different, or they might want an expansion of that feeling or that environment. So there is a relationship or a series, I think, that goes from room to room. The other thing, when you relate it to art, and when we were talking about this, I was thinking of Monet's lilies, right? I mean, he went out to his garden and he painted those lilies again and again and again. I think, and would like to say, first of all, we all think that, it's not good enough. So we try to improve on our work, expand on our work. And also, if you've got someone that wants a painting or a picture, they might want it a little bit different. And energy, or the capturing of a moment, is never the same. But it has relation. And I think series are not copies, but they're a series. They have relationship to one another, but they're each one is unique and different in its own right.
Okay. I can appreciate each one is unique in its own right, considering the fluctuating energy changes between author and creation. I'm sorry, between person and creation. Yes. Greg, let me call on you for a second, because you are making the transition at present. Again, please correct me. You're making the transition between single novels and starting a series. Is this a repeating character, or is everything taking place in a given city, and that's the theme that carries from one novel to the next? What made you make the decision to do this, to go from singular to series?
A couple things. So I think, there are certain stories that lend themselves well to series. Donna obviously mentioned detective stories. I think that's a big one. Anything where there's sort of an episodic nature to often the character's profession or their life, where it's a police officer whose job is to solve one crime after another. And each of those crimes can be its own story. I think it's obviously a scenario that lends itself very well to a series. The other one is just a really, really long story. So this is pretty common in epic fantasy. You know, from a very practical nature, George R. R. Martin could not have put the whole of A Song of Ice and Fire into a single book. It would weigh 10 pounds and no one could carry it around with them. It probably would be too big even for an ebook file. But it's not an episodic story. It's one long story where the characters develop over, several books and thousands of pages. So I think for me, I had an idea that I thought would work as a series. It's a detective story where the detective is in a near future America solving crime after crime after crime. And each of those crimes, let's say the more interesting crimes, are stories in the series. As an author, too, Donna touched on this. I think readers, especially detective fiction, expect that the story is going to be told over a series. Because, when I read a detective story, if I read a single detective story, I almost expect that I wonder at the end, when the detective solves that case, like if it's just a standalone book, what happens next to that detective? Surely he or she has more cases to solve, more work to do. So I think readers expect, detective stories to be a series. And in theory, the nice thing about a series is that if you have a reader finish one book, they're looking for the next book in that series. So, if you have a set of standalones, it's harder to sell that person on the next standalone, which may be a totally different character. totally different genre. But if you have a series, you can sell the reader on the next story, which is the same character doing something that they just enjoyed that character doing. So for me, it was a combination of I have an idea for a series, and I think it would work to, build my readership over several books.
Very good. And thank you for that little marketing bit of advice you had there. That was good. Um, one of the questions that I have as an author, and this is based on my reading, and I would love to know from Anne and Sarah if it translates into the visual artist realm. When you look at something like The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, that is really one book, kind of like George R.R. Martin's Fire and Ice. The Hobbit is actually the prologue or the prelude to The Lord of the Rings. And one of the things that Tolkien and other authors doing similar stuff have done is there's an overriding arc to the entire series. Each book is complete in itself. You don't really need to go to the next book. Of course, we all hope that people do, but you don't really need to go to the next book. That is one of the things that I find challenging myself as I'm making the shift into series. I want each story to be complete, but I also want there to be something beyond, well, this detective has to solve another case. I want there to be some kind of overarching element that the reader knows they're going to pick up. And the example I would use is Craig Johnson's Longmire books. Each novel is complete in itself, each short story is complete in itself, but at the same time, there's unanswered questions that had started in book 1. As he's solving book 7's murder mystery, he finds a piece to that original question, finds a bit of the solution. And that has carried through. I think he's up to novel 20 now. Personally, if this Longmire character doesn't solve it soon, I'm going to kill somebody. But that's me. I can be impatient. So I'm going to go back to you, Sarah, if I may. When you are creating this series, and I'm going to go back to your owl series. Obviously, there's an owl in each one, but you explored color. You explored background. You explored everything else. I noticed in that series, some of the owls are staring right ahead. Others are kind of perched off to the side a little bit. Were these just explorations, or were you exploring some kind of wisdom, as you put it, from the animal kingdom, from the animal world, that you wanted to convey a separate piece of it in each bit of art? Did I make sense at all? Did that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's evolved even more so since that first time that I created a collection of art. And I suddenly thought, as I was creating it, I realized how, in a very similar way to what the authors have been talking about today, that, when you're creating an art collection, people kind of know what to expect or have an expectation, and then they're looking forward to the next evolution of the owl collection, for argument's sake. What colors is she going to choose next? What's she going to add to the painting in terms of symbolism? I don't know if you can hear the crashing down rain here, but it's absolutely pouring down, thunder and everything. Anyway, so I'm sorry if I'm talking a bit loud. I'm trying to do it over the top of the rain, but yeah, it's now evolved even more, especially, dare I say, branding has sort of come into play in my business. And and I'm a wild woman artist. I am now relating all my art to the wild woman archetype, and it's still animal based. It's still wild birds, wild beasts. I still do owls, But I take elements of what I think are empowering about the wild woman archetype, and I infuse that in the art that I create. So earlier on this year, I created a collection of wild beasts that were all about sovereignty. So I had a beautiful stag. I've got, I had a lioness looking all cool and confident in the shadows, and so every painting in that collection was all to do with empowerment, sovereignty, and sort of standing up for yourself, courage. Yeah, that's the word I'm thinking of. I've done owls based upon the four elements. So I've got an earth spirit owl, a water spirit owl, air spirit, and what's the other one? Fire spirit. And again, it's all to do with the wisdom. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but the wisdom behind those themes that allow me to explore the art. I don't know if that answers your question, but I definitely take abstract ideas and put it into the art and try and use the way I use my brushstrokes might change, because I'm thinking of empowerment, or if I'm painting a deer and I'm wanting to sort of bring in more compassion and ease and encourage women to feel, to be kind to themselves and to, everybody, but I do particularly attract women, but, to have that self-compassion and that grace and ease, I might choose different, color tones. It will be more of a tranquil sort of texture rather than a real kind of in your face sort of like kind of painting. So yeah, I think they kind of work hand in hand, but I really love working like that because I can really get into it then. Do you know what I mean? It's like when you're just doing one, it sort of feels like, yeah, it's great. It tells a story, but just like when I read murder series and things like that. I want to tell more of the story. I want to tell more of what it feels like to be a wild woman. I want to bring more healing to women and whoever loves my art. So yeah.
I do appreciate that, and I have to say, from my perspective, when I finish a novel, for me it's kind of like, God, thank God that one's over. Anne, I know Ken and Amy have raised their hands, but Anne, if it's okay, I'd like to get your take on what Sarah and I were just mentioning back and forth. Is there in your painting world, do you find you explore a theme on several canvases? When you're doing a series, what is it that makes each element, each object unique from the next?
It's a good question.
Thank you.
I think it is the energy, the mood. So I paint lots of times from imagination, memory and imagination, meaning if there's a particular spot, and they're abstract impressionist paintings. And so there's a lot of feeling that goes into it. So when I am, let's say, doing a theory, or I'm in the mood or the tone to continue, that they're always different, and they're different because I'm different. And I might want to explore something, a nuance about something that I remember or imagine. And that could also be done. So the technical aspect can be done with brushstrokes. It can be done with color. It can be done with texture. It can be done with size, meaning I can paint 24 by 30 or a 5 by 7, still thinking or reflecting on that same place or that same spot in time, but it always comes out different And I think that's a reflection of what's going on inside me that projects outside. And I can just use different aspects of the technique to portray that.
Fascinating. I think that does have actual analogs, at least from my perspective, in the writing world. So I can appreciate what
Yes.
you're saying. We have some questions from the amazing and illustrious Ken, and then the ever tree endowed Amy. Ken, please.
Okay, it's not a question so much. We're talking about a lot of painters, and what you don't know, Joseph, is that my wife is a painter, and but she did series. I never, as a writer, liked doing series, but she was always into doing series. And one thing about them is that they always centered around something quirky. That, of course, is how she and I connect. So one of her favorite things in the world, now you do owls, she does, I hope you can see this, rubber ducks. And this was her calendar that she did. And this is the August, because we're coming up on August, this is the August month illustration for that calendar. And it's the rubber duck at the beach. But some of her rubber ducks, like here's one that she used for the front piece. It's nice winter scene. It's the Donner Party. So now, why do I do this? Because you raised something earlier, Joseph. You were talking about series and their goal and wisdom. And I want to talk about, I think the word wisdom is what is always implicit, whether it's in art, paintings, kind of surrealistic painting like my wife, the realistic animal. Wisdom is the goal of a series. The reason that you can have something like the hobbits and the towers and is because he's questing. He's questing for wisdom in his writing. And that's what gives a series oomph. Okay, the Longmire goes on because we know that the character, and therefore obviously the author, is still on his quest. You can have a series built around a character, and one of my favorites when I was a young writer and a young reader was Agatha Christie. And who doesn't like Hercule Poirot? Who doesn't love Marple? Well, then we realize that they're just pains. They're really a pain in my butt. They're an itch, a hemorrhoid. Why? Because they're not questing for anything. They think they know it all already. So I've never written a series because I'm not sure I'm capable of a long-run, meaningful quest. I'm more one of these people personally who does quirks, but and gets them closed up. My wife, though, on the other hand, she will keep that rubber duck going. She worked on that rubber duck. The rubber duck took part in different settings where famous artworks. The rubber duck is, for example, intrudes itself into American Gothic. It's stuck on the pitchfork. And the interesting thing, and this is why I'm again going back to that, is we happen to know somebody who grew up next to the family whose farm was painted in American Gothic. He knew the people, he knew the farm. He bought Roz's painting. He said, "You have captured this farm and these people better than the original painting because you added this duck." So I think that's the thing that I would say about, if we're serious about doing series, is that series should be something that is expanding us, that is making us search, and that is making our viewer search. And I want to tell one more quick story, and then I promise I'll stop talking. At one point, my wife was going to be showing in Copenhagen, and she did a series, very small paintings of Cockopelli. And for those of you who don't know what a Cockopelli is, look it up. They're great fun creatures. mythical creatures. She did this series. She said, oh, this should be fun in Copenhagen. Well, we had an open house at our home just so people could see the paintings before we shipped them off. And a father and son came in and they looked at the paintings and they bought almost all the Cockapellis. They never made it to Copenhagen. And this little boy who was very into art, and his father was very into art, the little boy said, these are all helping me to understand what the world is. So this is a kid, he's like 12 years old, and he talks like that. Yeah, he really did. And this is, he's looking at this mythical creature doing these various things. And the one that his father, and I have to tell you this last thing, the one the father refused to buy for him was of two Cockapellis having sex. And I always thought to myself, that was the silliest thing that father ever did.
What I'm, thank you, and what I'm taking away from this, and I'm hoping all our viewers do not do this. Two things: a rubber duck at the Donner Party, and Cockapellis having sex. So forget that. I'm going to ask the jury to ignore those comments. Amy, what have you for us?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what my question is, but I have a thought because some of my art, I think, is inspired similar to Sarah's art. I've seen a few of your paintings in your backgrounds, and I haven't seen your work before. But when you have impressionistic stuff, there are repetitions. And then when you're done with that repetition, you go to another one, at least for me. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I painted a mural on my wall, and it's like you're part of the ocean. So you're not looking at the ocean, you're not in the ocean, you're part of it. So I had to create sections that had similar hand repetitions, but it was also like in my brain. So what I was trying to do, and Mark, I'm glad you came back with because I don't have the right words for the music, but I think this pertains to people's character, like maybe some of Donna's characters in there. But so if you have music and then you have the music in the background would stay consistent, but the notes up front would change. And so that's kind of the way that I look. Every house I've lived in, I've created a mural that's the full wall. And I used to do it in some of the houses that I sold for other people. So none of them have looked the same, but they have a similar, I guess, feeling. And whoever is looking at it sees something different. And Sarah, that's the way I feel about your art. And Donna, the way that you described some of your characters, or how Sarah was talking about how the owl was different aspects of her mom, and I think it was like cathartic when you were letting things out. So I'm just wondering if anybody else can comment on what they think I might be asking. Or put it in more coherent words.
Well, I'm not going to, Amy, but I'm going to let others answer. And Donna, before I call on you, one of the things that I'm hearing, and Amy just kind of really locked it in for me, is regarding, for example, her murals, Sarah's art, Anne's art. I haven't heard it specifically from Donna or Greg, but this is what I'm kind of wondering if it's there. When we create series of work, and I'm going to homage to Ken here, are we actually going for a quest in ourselves? Are we really, through our art, whether it's on pen, with pen or paintbrush, are we searching for something inside ourselves which we know, and I'm just using this phrasing, we know one novel's not going to solve. We know one novel's not going to answer. Donna is beginning to smile and laugh, and Greg is saying, you did too much crack in the 80s, Joseph. But it's a question I wonder, because now that I'm embarking on a series, both of the series that I'm starting, listening to what was been said, I realized, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm searching for answers in myself. So Donna, please. And Amy, when people answer your question, I will let them talk. I swear to God. Donna, please.
Sorry, Amy, I've got to address Ken. I think the quest and internal stuff is maybe the goal of literature. But you know, the one saying about girls just want to have fun. I write popular fiction. I've never wanted to write literature. Mysteries like what I do are also called escape fiction. It's offering people a puzzle to solve and something to sink their teeth into that has nothing to do with their own real life. It's
Honor, if I may interrupt you, I have read your stuff and I love your stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, I did not mean to deprecate any more than I'm deprecating Agatha Christie, who, you know, I think was brilliant. It's just a different type of notion of series writing that I was.
With different goals. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
absolutely.
Yeah, I try to write pretty good prose, and I don't know how well I succeed, but the goal of the type of mystery I do is just entertainment and escape from your real life. And as I think I've said before, people often tell me they appreciate the escape. You know, like I mentioned that someone said, oh, I'm going to take this to the hospital with me next week. I'm really honored to think that that's serving a purpose for them.
So your background music would be like escape music. So anybody who wanted to do that could hear it, feel it when they're reading your books.
I have no idea what it would be.
I want to let me jump in here for a second. Craig, would you classify your work as escapist literature?
I, not necessarily. I mean, I think, you know, I've written stuff that I consider maybe more literary fiction and stuff that I consider more genre fiction. And the series I'm working on now tends more towards genre fiction. Um, but I think, you know, as Donna and Ken both pointed out, like the reason that Agatha Christie's books have stood the test of time is because Poirot and Marple do offer insights into, you know, bigger issues, and because those characters are so well crafted. Um, you know, and there are other mystery series that maybe provide as much escapism as those, but just don't have the same level of craftswomanship as Agatha Christie's work. Um, and so I think, you know, this idea of searching, having a quest or finding wisdom certainly applies to a series, certainly applies to, you know, very long series where there is a literal quest. But a book like Heart of Darkness is a quest. Marlowe's going upriver to find Kurtz, but it's a novella. It's stood the test of time because of how well it is written and the stories that it tells. So I think, you know, stories can, and the best stories are both. They entertain us and they make us think about the world at large and our place in it.
Okay, I'll accept that. And I'm going to ask a question of both you and Don. I've read your work, Greg, and it's wonderful. I strongly recommend it to people. I describe it as cerebral. When I read your stuff, I'm thinking. You're making my brain go, wow, okay, I like that. And because I'm an author, I say I'm going to steal that. That's really good. Donna, I've read your work, And I would not call it cerebral. I would definitely call it linear. I can see your plot points as they're happening. And because I read your work, I go, okay, I know she's going to do this next. And when you don't do it, I get pissed off. Oh, damn. But then you do it 20 pages further on. I'm like, okay, good. I wasn't doing something weird there. So I'm going to still work on that escapism thing. I'm going to work in visual art too, because, for example, Starry Night, I'm in it. I'm gone. I see that and I'm just in there. And it's not just Starry Night, the Bayonne Tapestry. I look at the Bayonne Tapestry and I'm hearing the horses and I'm hearing the story and I'm hearing the slaughter going on. Really good art pulls me in as much as a really good story. I can view visual art as escapism, as escapist. Anyway. How big is the escapism realm? Sarah, Anne, Donna, and Greg, and possibly Amy. I know you have another book coming based on the same theme, right? Where do we say, no, this shall not be escapism? Or are we with Isaac Bashevat Singer, who had that great insight? I don't seek to educate people, I seek to entertain them. I can't educate them until I entertain them. And his stories are all basically morality plays, but you're laughing your head off or you're crying reading them.
Before anybody
Discuss.
answers, I would like to say that in my mind, the escapism, which was how other people might view it, is actually my way of finding like the truth or going deeper, is when I leave everything that we are and we see and we do, is when I find truth and knowledge and wisdom, whether it's for 20 minutes or several hours.
Understood. Thank you. Anne, can I call on you, please?
Yes, I'd like to, I'm sort of writing and I'm all over the place now, but let me try to get some key points in. So you were talking about escapism, projecting yourself into artwork. But I also see, as everyone here is writers, so I'm going to digress a little bit, and all of books, paintings, that's all figments of our imagination. Those characters are your characters. Those are created by you. No one else can do that. And when I say that, it makes me think of, are we writing? I mean, some are deliberate series, and then some is deliberate style. Like Amy said, she sees repetitive motion in some of her paintings. I take that as to be as a signature style. And that style comes from your imagination. That imagination, to a reader, to a viewer, provokes sensory, feeling, touching, imagination. And just every book, every story, just as Starry Night, you immerse yourself in it and you feel like you're somewhere unique to your imagination. So are characters in a book, meaning I might read one of your books and have a character, and other than what you tell me, and lots of times writers don't tell all, I can picture what the eyes look like, the nose looks like, the walk looks like, their air of how they carry themselves, or their facial expressions, or the actual room that they're sitting in, is all based on my imagination. So I think that, I don't know where this is ending up, but I see that there's style, and that style gets transferred to the recipient. who then imagines everything. And that's, I think, what our purpose is to provoke imagination.
Something, excuse me, something you said, which again, I think this goes across creative endeavors, and I want to have everyone respond. You're mentioning Amy's repetitive brushstrokes.
Mhm.
In the speaking for myself, in the writing world, I recognize that as the author's voice, which tends to be very unique. It tends to be a very crucial element of the author's branding. You know, for example, a lot of my readers have said to me that it doesn't matter what genre it's marketed under. My genre is Joseph. Doesn't matter what they pick up of mine. It can be nonfiction. They go, yeah, I can tell that you wrote that. Hopefully not because it sucks, but so it goes. So, and I do recognize in Donna's work, I can hear Donna. She has a very strong, very powerful, very unique voice. Feel free to disagree with me, Donna. Likewise, with Greg's work, I hear his voice, not meaning him speaking. I mean, I can tell it's Greg writing. I consider these very powerful things. When I look at Sarah's artwork, I can tell that she did that. Nobody's going to do that kind of artwork. That's her. If somebody else attempts to do that kind of artwork, I'll find them and hurt them because I don't want anybody to impinge on Sarah's abilities and her goals. So much for a spiritual quest, eh, Sarah? I'm going to hurt people. That's very, very spiritual. So I'm gonna go to Donna. You're going to add something here, I hope, Donna.
Yes, you know, I like that you said that voice is extremely important. That was what publishers were looking for and still do, I'm sure. And the last thing I do in my final draft is make my book sound more like me. I just finished a first draft yesterday, and 2 more drafts, and that's the goal. The final draft is to make it sound like me, to relax and just use more words and make it as comfortable for the reader as I can be.
I know your hand is up, Sarah. I want to go back to Greg for a second. Greg, when you're writing, and I'm going to assume that recognizing you're not on Mount Olympus or Asgard, there are several drafts, at least more than one. If you get it all down in one draft, Greg, I'm going to be very upset with you. So do you just naturally put your voice into it? Do you recognize your authorial voice? Or as Donna said, draft, okay, now I'm going to put the Donna in it.
No, I mean, I think, you know, my voice probably, what you might think of my voice probably comes through in my standalones, but I'd be interested to see what you think of this new series because all my standalones are third person, and this series is first person, told from perspective of a you know cynical, dry-witted private detective. So he, you know, has his own voice, which yeah, obviously comes through me. Um, so in writing these books, I've been thinking about what is his voice? How would he say this? And ultimately, it's me, but I'm thinking about it in a different way.
Well, I don't want to disagree with you, but I'm going to. I think that fact that it comes through you, even if it's this unique character, so it may have very unique phrasing for the character, may have very unique language, but the way it's presented to me is going to be Greg. That's just my opinion.
Yeah,
Sarah,
and
go
I
ahead.
wouldn't disagree with you. It could very well be that. I think, you know, it's hard for me to read my own work and say this sounds like me, this doesn't sound like me, especially when there are definitely different narrators. So I'm curious to see what you think or what other readers think when they read this series.
Everybody recognize that Greg wants you to go get his books. Sarah, please.
I've forgotten what I was going to say really, but there were so many things coming into my head. from what everyone's been saying, and then I forgot what I raised my hand up originally for. But I was thinking about going back to the voice, your artistic or your authorial voice. I think that's a really important thing. I think if you think about all the artists you know, the ones that have been recorded in our history of art, there is a very definite way that they all paint. They might change the subject, they might change their color palette or whatever. And it's the same with authors, you know, I mean, J.R.R. Tolkien's voice is the same all the way through his series, isn't it? You know, it doesn't change. It's, I mean, I don't know whether he did any other things other than the Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but I'm not a massive fan of all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's really powerful when you have a signature style or a signature way of expressing yourself or a signature theme, or I just think it's really powerful because you become known for that. It becomes your thing. And then people sort of find you more memorable as a result of it, and therefore might refer you to somebody, recommend you, you know, buy your book, buy it for other friends, that kind of thing. I think it's really, I personally love um, reading books that are very much of that person and that style. I read tons and tons of cozy murders. I couldn't even tell you the authors, to be honest. They're but it's not so much the authorial voice there, but it's the genre voice that I love about that. Um, and it's the ones that are funny that I like the most, the sort of slightly slapstick sort of ones. And they tend to be very British, and sort of whimsical, I suppose. And funnily enough, I never used to read them. And it's only since I've become a whimsical artist that I've started to read them. And they are pure escapism because my work demands me to think things in different ways. I love just sort of vegging out with a cozy murder at the end of the day. I don't want to read the stuff that that I read, you know, 10, 20 years ago. And so I think it's really powerful. You become known. And what I did last year, this is like, you might not have been aware of this, Joseph, but I challenged myself back in February last year to paint an owl a day. Now, these weren't for sale because they were just like in my sketchbook. Um, or you know, some of them became for sale, and some of them informed artwork that became for sale. But I painted one every day, and I was going to do it for a year. I didn't quite get to a year. I did about 200 days. So I did 200 owls, and they were all really different. And I loved it because it really allowed me to express other ways of, you know, how can you do 200 owls differently? That was such a challenge. And it was, you know, it was a really important one for me because I really got to know my artistic style even more and the things that I really loved doing and the things that I didn't like doing so much and the things that didn't work and the things that did work. So it was a wonderful exploration to do that. So I think artistic voice, or at least genre voice, is really, really powerful because you know what you're getting. You know, just like you were saying with Donna's work, you get to know. I mean, I'm reading these books by a lady called Mary Grand, and you know, everything is sort of really sort of all her plots are quite predictable. You know, I know what's going to happen. You know, but I love that. I love that. And it's like the same with some of the series that I've watched on TV, you know, like House or The Good Doctor. They all have the same structure, more or less, for every single episode. And it's like having a good friend in your living room or in your book. And I think that's really important for me. And it's not surprising, actually, that I do the same with my art, actually. Yeah.
Fascinating. I love that that idea of it's like having a good friend in your living room with you. Um, you're causing me to rethink my ideas here. That's excellent. And you have something for us.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about the same kind of thing Sarah was thinking about, and who is the audience for what kind of series? Because we have these very, kind of questy, and then we have the more comfortable, The Good Doctor kind of series, which, by the way, I love too. Um, and the answer is that what are we looking for in life? What are we, when we pick up a book or we go to the art museum or whatever it is we're doing, we may be wanting different things. Some of us want more than one thing. Some people are more dependable. They just want to watch the football game every Sunday, Some people want to have some brain challenge and to be cerebral one day and other, so I think what we're talking about is the audience also is a part of whether it's serial or standalone. And that's one thing I had thought about, and I'm glad you brought that up. But what I had raised my hand originally for was something else, which is performance, which we haven't talked about at all. And we have not had Sabina with us for a while, which is a shame, because I'd love to hear her talk about doing a series and how you do it. Years ago, I was greatly influenced by going as a kid to hear Carl Sandburg. And he was a wonderful presenter. But I had a question at the end that I never got to ask him or got an answer to, which is if he recited the same poem tomorrow, would it be the same poem? Okay. Would it sound differently? Now, I do poetry, and so I do performance poetry sometimes. And I've been very struck by the fact that I seldom read the same poem twice the same way, unless it happens to be that I'm reading it at the same time. Like, I've read it and now I'm going to read it again because I'm trying to put it on a YouTube or TikTok or something. But if I get up at one open mic and I read a poem and then a couple weeks later I'm at some other event and I decide to, for whatever reason, read that same poem, I am intensely aware that I'm not reading the same poem. The words are the same, but the poem isn't the same. And so when we're talking about series, that brings up how many times do we reread a book as part of our search for that series? You mentioned watching TV, serial TV. I've watched the same TV series more than once sometimes. Okay. The Good Doctor being one of them. I love watching The Good Doctor more than once. Why? Because I was so aware of the interplay of the characters that I cared about. It wasn't just I had a good friend, it was I had life around me. So I think the question, what makes a serial viewer as opposed to a standalone? What makes us connect to that serial? And also, how does being in a serial affect us? And could we possibly, hopefully someday get a person who has played in a series and get them to tell us, like, how has it affected them to be in that series? And that's enough.
Amy, please.
Well, that was actually what Ken said is related to what I was going to say. So if we look at our own lives as a series, who I was at 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 isn't who I am today, but I've always been me. And I'm very fortunate that I've had friends for my entire life. I have friends from elementary school and high school and college and after college. And some people I might see once a year, or some people I might see, once a month. But what they've always said, they're like, "Oh, you've always been this way," or "You're exactly the same." And I'm thinking, well, no, I'm not. I'm completely different. But they're talking about the inside of Amy, the spirit of Amy. And for 7 years, I actually did work in a series, Kenneth. It just didn't happen to be on TV. It happened to be in a medical system. And what I was supposed to do is I was the simulated patient, and my specialty was high risk birthing procedures. So I was always pregnant for 7 years, and I gave birth many, many, many times. and and it was pretty amazing because I would actually be the patient and I would wear these little gadgets and I would birth babies, and I had different doctors and different scenarios, and it did really change me. And one of the things that I didn't expect out of it was when I first started doing it, I was like, okay, here's my character, and I had to make it as real as possible. And when I was interacting with doctors that were either like not so good or average or whatever, I sort of I sort of stayed Amy. But when I worked with doctors who were highly intuitive and highly empathic, I sort of stopped being Amy and I became that patient. And I taught myself how to unlearn all of the social skills and body movements that your parents and the society tells you not to do. You know, like, oh, I'm angry, my back hurts, or oh, I'm upset, my knees are shaking, or I trained myself to have my body react so that the provider, the doctors and the nurses that were going through this, they had to ascertain what my feelings and emotions were based upon my body movements, not my words. And that gave me an entirely different perspective on like letting go of my own emotions and my own ego and becoming something else. And it was usually for about 15 or 20 minutes, but it it allowed me to feel different on the inside. And I think that it has drastically helped in my writing.
I have to ask because I think this is just so interesting to me. I'm thank you so much for sharing it. Um, have you an intrusive question, if I may? Subsequent to doing that, have you had children of your own? Subsequent,
I I had two kids before all of that, which a lot of times they were my specialty was in high risk birthing procedures, which meant mom and or baby could not make it. And before I would prep myself for an hour, I'd go in my office, close the door, and watch YouTube videos pertaining to what I was going to go through. And I always imagined it was my children who weren't going to make it.
I was just
And
wondering if you had afterwards, if it changed the way you interacted with doctors in your own life. That's why I was asking.
oh yeah, when I go to the doctor now, it's like this is an interactive thing and we're working on this thing together. I don't go and go like, okay, doctor, tell me what to do.
I want to get over to Donna. She's had her hand up for a while.
Hi. I was interested in the description of changing and evolving. I used to read cozies like crazy, like Sarah, and the reason I started writing them was I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to read a character with a little more depth. So I wrote my own and stayed with that for 8 books. But one of my editors had said, I think you have to try a bigger book. Well, the challenge interested me and the change interested me at that point, but it took me 7 years to get the new voice down. And I am now into the 4th book of that series, and suddenly it just flows. I finally am comfortable with the more adult, more complex voice. And I don't know whether I'll write another cozy. I still think they're wonderful. I also think they've evolved a little bit since I was beginning back then. But it's interesting to me that the new voice is now mine.
Thank you, Donna. I think that's that to me is a good closing. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I want to I think I generally want to observe the notion of variations on themes. And I think maybe that's a lot of what is going on in our work generally. Ken, in I think our last meeting, I mentioned a story by Arthur C. Clarke called The Ultimate Melody, and I don't think I shared it, but I did put it in the chat window today because you were talking about something about the kinship between music that appeals to us and the way our brains work. But in your opening, Joseph, you said something, speaking of music, you said something about 1, 4, 5 progressions. And actually, I find that kind of fascinating because for people who may not be familiar, blues music typically follows the 1, 4, 5 progression. Most jazz progressions are 2, 5, 1. The numbers corresponding to chords in a scale. But what fascinates me about it, particularly about blues, is that the people who tend to favor more tonal or melodic exploration are the ones that appeal most to me. And I'll give you two examples. And I don't want to be misunderstood. I appreciate their work. But for example, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Clapton play pentatonic scales, 5 note scales in the keys of the songs they happen to be playing. Other more sophisticated players, Robin Ford occurs to me right off the bat, they are more likely to play the chord changes, meaning to play tones that occur within the different chords in whatever progression they're playing. I find that much more engaging. But either way, they're all variations on themes. And I wonder if Sarah and Donna and Greg actually find variations on themes in their works, considering the fact that they're working in series, if you will.
Okay, who wants to leap in here?
I
Sarah.
change up my format.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Donna. You're speaking.
Very quickly, I change up my format pretty often now. I don't know whether that's answering your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Sarah.
Yeah, I change, although it's a theme, there's a lot of change in color and texture and different mediums as well. I do a lot of collage and things like that. So it's not like one image, the same image painted the same every time, and everything is intuitive with my artwork. It starts intuitively. So I don't really also know, other than the fact that I'm painting an owl, what it's going to end up looking like.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I would suggest that more sophisticated musicians who are likely to follow, to play with the chord changes, the impression those people give me is that they're being more colorful. They're adding more color, more flavor, things like that, rather than just sticking with, five notes in one particular key.
Greg, did you have something you wanted to share with Mark?
Yeah, but Mark, I don't know much about playing guitar, but what you said about variations on a theme is kind of exactly how I would think of the series that I'm just starting on. So I can't speak to it in too much detail, but in my mind, thinking about it now, the theme is this world I'm imagining, this near future kind of quasi dystopian world. And the variations are, each book is a detective um, tackling a case that comes from a different part of society or from a client with different goals. And then the detectives are responding to that and working through to solve the case, but also dealing with the world he's immersed in and the client that's giving him an assignment based on his own personality and the detective's own goals.
Thanks, Greg. I actually caught your comment earlier when you were saying that, the character is sort of a quintessential, cynical, wisecracking detective. I recently published a graphic novel, and the protagonist is very much that.
Yeah, and I think, that itself is a variation on a theme. Like that character occurs across literature, for at least the last 100 years, if not longer. And,
Yep.
you know, the way the people enjoy that theme, but I think they also appreciate the uniqueness of different variations.
Agreed. Raymond Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett. Yeah, absolutely.
I realize that Anne left, but did anyone else appreciate the fact that Yoda joined us for a second?
Still,
I didn't catch that. Oh, there he is.
Yes.
you
All I
gotta
could
go
see was
out.
the top of the head and the ears, and I thought, oh my God, Yoda's here.
Yeah.
He is like Yoda. Miss Eddie, my assistant,
Very good.
has to excuse himself for a minute.
Rick, I'm going to ask you to be quick so we can close this meeting. Please share with us.
Oh, I thought we had 20 more minutes. I'm sorry.
No, I'm being belligerent today.
You're being yourself. Okay. Only a few quick comments. When Ken was talking about the poem is always different. It's the same words, but what I would say is great art and great poems can always be interpreted differently. I think that's what makes it great. And whether that's stories, novels, music, even. I would only echo some comments that some types of fiction really lead to series. Sherlock Holmes, James Bond, Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian. And I've found those series really fascinating. Sherlock Holmes didn't really grow that much. Maybe at the very end when he's retired is a little bit different. James Bond didn't really, was always the same, except actually towards the end. He actually gets married, and then his wife gets killed, half an hour after their wedding. And then the next novel, he's totally depressed. He only lived twice. That's sort of a double entendre for that. And then he's captured by the Russians and he's brainwashed. And then M just sends him almost on a suicide mission, for Man with a Golden Gun. So he actually puts something different, in the end, other than the same character. Well, Robert E. Howard's Conan, boy, from the age of 16 to 45. I think Howard's really been underappreciated as an author, because if you really read Conan critically, it's really great literature. And of course, as far as kids, cartoons or series, Rocky and Bullwinkle, all those adventures, and Mr. Peabody and Sherman, comic books, especially Marvel, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Thor, Captain America, those are all great. And basically themes, as we've mentioned, that's what really, infuses, really good work, and that's what really makes it interesting. So basically you need a story to tell, unlike Hollywood, where it's Jaws 1 through 10 and, Jurassic Park 1 through 10, that's not a series. That's just, marketing, trying to rip off the public, just for money. But if we're running out of time, I'll leave it at that.
Very good. Thank you, Rick. And I do appreciate the literary efforts of the greats that you brought up. Okay, obviously the dogs want us to go. Everybody, thank you. People who are here for the first time, thank you so much. I hope you'll come back and join us again. We like to think we have lively discussions. We like to think we're all learning here. I appreciate your time, folks. Everyone who's tuning in, who's viewing, do remember the last Thursday of every month, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, whatever that is in your time zone. Take care, all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for watching RoundTable 360, where creatives from diverse fields and across the globe gather to discuss what's relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. RoundTable 360 is brought to you by Northern Lights Publishing. Our shows are taped the last Thursday of every month at 1:30 p.m. Hawaiian time, 4:30 p.m. Mountain Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 12:30 a.m. London Time, 1:30 a.m. CEST, and whatever time that converts to wherever you are. Please join us. Get your invite at http://nlb.pub/roundtable. See you next time, and until then, stay safe and well.